Guys, what's going on? Welcome to Serial at Midnight. My name is Heath, and I am joined by Eric Grigs, the maestro from poptrashmuseum.com, for a conversation about camp. We are your camp counselors today. Mr. Grigs, Eric, what's going on? How you doing?
Hey, Heath. Thanks for having me.
So I'm excited about this. A conversation about camp. You have been over at poptrashmuseum.com. You're kind of dedicated to the preservation of camp, writing about it. I mean, this is what you do all day, every day. And you're going to kind of guide us through, well, let's start with this. Like, what is camp? What are we talking? We're not talking about the place you go in the summer. You know, you bring your clothes and you play volleyball. What are we talking about when we say camp?
Right. Gather around the fireplace. We're going to tell a scary story about a genre called camp. We're talking about, a lot of people would say it's the so bad it's good. They might describe it as cheesy, but we're going to talk about some of the hallmarks of what might be a genre of that camp is, or something being campy. But we also are going to acknowledge we're talking about a point of view, and everybody's perception is different, and what they enjoy or don't enjoy or pick up on or find thrilling is different. And that's great. And camp allows for that. It's really being serious about the frivolous and frivolous about the serious. So we're going to dig into it, talk about some of our recommendations, things that we enjoy.
Let's reference this book if this shows up. This is Susan Sontag's I think it was published in 1964 the first time. This is her essay, Notes on Camp. And she tries to define what camp is. And I mean, if you're serious about this subject and you find this video interesting, I'd recommend going to check it out. But it's also, that was almost 60 years ago. And what are some more modern examples? Let's do this. When we talk about camp, I think of Flash Gordon. I think of the character Pee Wee Herman, who, maybe our age, maybe like Gen X grew up in this like golden age for camp. I think maybe we did. I think I'm wearing my Batman 1966 shirt because I think that was a master use of camp. Do you have any thoughts on Batman as camp?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we can really talk about camp and study it, even though we need to acknowledge it's a little bit like nailing Jello to a wall. As soon as you start looking at it, it slides down the wall. We're just going to talk about our recommendations. But Batman, yes, it's great. Most people think when they think of camp or campy television, Batman 66. It was something that could be enjoyed on two levels. If you're a kid, you're watching it and you're like, oh, Batman and Robin are in peril. Will they make it? Tune in next day. But as an adult, you go back and you look at it and you're like, oh, it's played seriously, but it's meant to be a comedy, and so there are all these zany guest stars of stars from the past.
You're like, is that Sammy Davis Jr.?
Yeah, you're just like loving it. Shelley Winters is Ma Barker, and everybody and their brother showed up on it. And that was part of the fun. It was meant to be fun. Mm-hmm. It wasn't meant to be a straight drama.
We've talked behind the scenes about how Batman 1989 is a super campy movie. It didn't feel like it at the time, which is another thing we probably need to talk about how like perspective, as you get older, the like time in addition to the content. So like, tell me what you think about Batman 1989 in terms of
I mean, we both grew up in the 80s, and so it's really interesting to like think of Batman's trajectory on film at certain points. And in 89 it was like, oh my gosh, he threw somebody down the church steeple and it's so dark, and the suit was dark and it was heavy. And then you look at Jack Nicholson's performance and it's not that far off from Cesar Romero's. It's pretty campy. And so like, I mean,
there's a scene in that where he's like, whoop, whoop. Like, what are you doing?
If you compare it, if you grew up, now, and you show them Batman 89, they would view it just as much as anybody in 89 would have viewed 66 as campy, and that doesn't bode well for Zack Snyder's Justice League. I mean, what we're looking at, how dark it is now and how serious it is, it will eventually, or even now, if you appreciate kind of the time of trajectory, it's campy in itself. Superheroes are campy. They're dressing up in crazy costumes to fight crime. When you step away from that, trying to say, oh, we have to make this so dark and realistic, this isn't realistic to begin with. So, I mean, there's a moment in the new Zack Snyder Justice League, which I enjoyed parts of it. I'm not dogging on it, but Lois Lane holds Clark Kent's cape and is sad about it. And I'm thinking like, she should be holding pixels. His cape is animated. He doesn't even wear a cape in reality. That's the camp levels that my mind went to watching it. So we're really talking about like, is something intrinsically camp or not? No, it's kind of sometimes a point of view that you bring to it. You know, you might see this as a drama. I might see it as a comedy.
Yeah, and I think one of the hallmarks of it is it sort of subverts the norm. You know, we're talking about superhero movies. Well, it's subverting that. You talk more about subverting the norm.
Yeah, I mean, camp is meant to be serious, but make a funny point. You brought up in previous discussions, you know, Laugh-In, which is a great 60s hallmark of like, it was, you know, it had a political point of view. It was anti-Vietnam War, but, you know, it was couched in the counterculture movement and critiquing it and make fun of it. The two hosts were older, not hippie looking. Some of the casts were a little more hippie. It was like playing with those expectations on every level, but making comments and allowing people to make their own judgments and viewpoints and maybe make a point with humor. And camp wants to play around with things. It doesn't want to say, it's black and white. The answer is here, and I'm going to present it to you. No, it wants to play in the grays. It wants all the colors of the crayon box. So that's when camp is firing on all cylinders. And that's what makes it fun. Nobody wants to be told, oh, this is how you should view this, or this is how you need to view this, which is campy in and of itself, because we're talking about how you view things in this video. So
yeah, well, it's in modern society, we're so politically divided, where, you know, the left hates the right and the right hates the left. And you go back to a show like Laugh-In, where all those things were still, you know, there was still a political divide. But as you point out, you know, you've got hosts that are very square, and one of them's got like a peace sign on his jacket at all. I mean, they're like Rat Pack guys. They're like old Vegas Rat Pack guys, but they've got their peace sign. And I was telling you, like, they make constant, like in the early shows, they're making constant John Wayne references. John Wayne being, of course, a pillar of the right, like very conservative values. Guess who has a recurring cameo on Laugh-In for many episodes? This is John Wayne. He comes on, you know, Laugh-In would do the sock it to me thing. There's a ton of like, sock it to me, sock it to, like, he's having fun with the conventions that people have built. It just takes itself less seriously, and it realizes kind of the joke of everything.
Mm-hmm. And you have to know all those references. You have to know who John Wayne is, and you have to, so camp in some respects requires some sense of cultural literacy and knowing kind of what has come before you, and that you just don't exist in a vacuum and that this is the right way to go because somebody told you that. There's a world of other viewpoints out there, and camp wants to play in that playground.
Getting the references, seeing, knowing who that you mentioned in a conversation we had, you mentioned like George Peppard on the Love Boat. Like, well, the A-Team generation might get that. And, you know, if you know, like Banachek or what, like there, you have to know who that is to even get you're just like, oh, it's another old guest star that I've never heard of. So
yeah. If you sit on your couch watching a show with IMDb and you're like, oh, who's the guy that was in the guy and he was in that obscure episode of this, and you love that, 6 degrees from actor B who was in Hawaii Five-0 and made a cameo, that camp is for you.
Do you find there to be, we're talking about like political subversion across everything. What about moral subversion? What about, does it have a set of guidelines?
I mean, again, camp needs to have this kind of big sandbox. Again, we're talking about living in the grays, and it's really not prescriptive of a certain judgment. You may be watching something and making judgments like, oh, that outfit is crazy, or this line was very funny and it wasn't meant to be funny. Those are judgments. But camp is going to allow for all of that. A good example, there's an article, Postcards from Camp by J. Brian Lauder on Slate. Definitely recommend looking those up. He tells a story of someone who died, and in their purse was a list of the people who were not allowed to attend the funeral, which is so campy. And he makes the point that society would say you can only view death as a tragedy and you have to be sad. And camp says, no, look at this. This is hilarious and funny. What is there going to be like a velvet rope? You can't come in. Oh, you're on the list. No. So that is funny. And that's what like camp brings to a situation. It sends it up. It kind of takes the piss out of things. It's just, again, subverting the norm. And so we could get into talking about how cult films are doing that. If you love John Waters movies, absolutely. He's, the Pope of Trash. If you love Rocky Horror is a good example of camp and where camp and cult kind of meet. If you've been to a midnight showing, you have that point of view that all these other people do, where somebody you might show Rocky Horror to and they'd be like, I don't get it. What am I supposed to get? That camp is playing around with that. And your perspective may be a little different than mine, but what you find kind of the thrill of the whisper or the thing that gives you the jolt that you latch onto that is maybe marginal or not really that important, but that is your jam.
You were telling me that like Showgirls, like there's this cult around Showgirls now that's very similar, that's a camp classic now.
Yeah, I would say kind of the trifecta of great camp movies goes Valley of the Dolls, Mommy Dearest, and then Showgirls. And they're all from different eras pretty much. So you can kind of see different camp expressions over time. But yeah, there's a great documentary called You Don't Know Me, a pun on the character's name. And he explores and interviews Verhoeven and, interviews back in the day when he was making the film was like, oh no, I'm making a very serious film about, how Las Vegas and grinds people down. But now he's like, oh yeah, I was making a comedy. Yeah, it was supposed to be funny. And it's like, what is it? He's playing fast and loose and kind of rewriting history, but camp has kind of claimed it. And it's always been camp. Because if you watched it then, there was huge outrage over it because people were greeting it as like a serious movie as he wanted people to. But then there's lines in it. The villain throws marbles to trip somebody. There's just amazing things in it that camp should be that kind of, you sit back and you're like, what the hell did I just watch? That's when camp is really fun. Like I said, people say so bad it's good. At Pop Trash, I say it's all good. Whatever you like, it's good. And I love that Serial at Midnight kind of espouses that viewpoint too. Just love what you love. And sometimes camp is the most fun playground to be in because it doesn't say you have to love something. It's not somebody else's judgment. It's your judgment.
And it's not doing it hatefully either. It's not doing it in a mean or, a suppressive way. It's doing it in a way that's like calling something out and asking us to appreciate it. Now we can appreciate it for bad qualities, but it's not a hateful thing. It's ultimately, it's like a loving thing. Like we love these things because of what we're connecting with. Like I love the John Wayne bit and laughing because it's unexpected. Two, it shows that he is not so serious that he can't make fun of the whole situation. And it is ultimately kind of inviting us in to say, well, these boundaries that exist, I don't have to abide by those. I can kind of see things for the way I want to see them. And maybe on that note, like we need it more than ever. I don't know that it's as appreciated. I think camp, there are those of us who love camp. But I feel like it's not as mainstream as it has always been. It's there, but it's not as picked up on. What do you think?
Yeah, there were articles recently that say, oh, camp is dead because everybody wants to take things seriously. And it's either you arrive at the right answer or the wrong answer, and or go to Twitter jail. And we're not talking about that. We're talking about camp is just there to help you explore many different viewpoints. You can still make your own judgment on that, but it really allows for kind of this inclusive worldview. And hey, it's fun. It wants you to play along. It wants to invite you in if you aren't set on the predetermined, supposed to arrive at viewpoint.
Yes. Do you want to give anybody any recommendations, some camp homework to take home with them and work on, or should we? We've covered a lot.
Isn't about homework, but yeah, there are so many films.
some delicious little camp weenies to roast.
Camp would rip that paper right up and throw it in the trash.
That's right.
I recently just watched The Fan, which has Michael Biehn in it as a serial killer who's stalking an old Lauren Bacall. And she does this great musical number called Hearts Not Diamonds. She warbles her way through it in a fantastic way. Check that out. You introduced me to The Eyes of Laura Mars, which you kind of camp out at. Has Faye Dunaway in it, who is a great camp icon. I mean, we could talk about films with camp icons. You're probably watching, even if you're like, what is camp? I don't know. I'm watching this video to find out more. You probably have already watched a lot of camp things. Like, I mean, Airplane, The Naked Gun. It's like Batman 66 that is presented so straight. And you look at Leslie Nielsen now, who we could call him a camp icon as well, because he delivers that as if he's performing a drama or Shakespeare. And it's funny because of what he's saying and the subversive things that are happening. And then you go back in time and you see him in actual dramas from like the 50s or 60s, and it's hard to take him seriously. So like, did he ruin his career? It's funny how camp is like folding time back on itself. Like we become the parody of what we were, and now that in the past is a parody. It's illuminating, and this is what we're talking about, like camp being nailing Jello to the wall. It's a bit of a mind bender, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But it's rewarding, and I think that's it's fun, and it, as I say, like it invites you to enjoy the things with it. And so on that note, I want to just ask those who are watching this video to join in the conversation with camp recommendations, with I mean, we only got to like the tip of the iceberg in this video, but Titanic, speaking of icebergs, James Cameron's Titanic. This is pretty campy in a lot of ways.
Oh, absolutely. Draw me like your French girls. Right. and he could totally fit on that. I know that's the big debate. He could fit on that door.
Yeah. Tell people where they can find everything that's going on with you and your writing. I mean, you do this stuff like all the time.
Yeah, we post articles regularly, myself and other writers, on poptrashmuseum.com. We're doing a radio show. If you are on the Stationhead app, check us out. We do radio shows called the Pop Trash Playlist, where we examine a playlist of music, and we talk about that there. We're on social media. Join us on Facebook, primarily on Instagram. Very active on Instagram, so check that out.
Wonderful. And I'm also going to recommend people go check out our commentary of the 1990 Dick Tracy film that you and I did, that they can find on YouTube. I'll link to that in the description of this video, as well as all of the Pop Trash Museum links as well. Mr. Griggs, thank you so much for being here to talk with us about this.
Always a pleasure.
This has been great. And guys, again, keep the conversation going. Let us know what you think about it. Let's keep camp alive. So thanks. Take care. And until next time, we will catch you later.